Let's now take a look at the rotor brakes. Let's focus our initial analysis on Sol 3 and Sol 4. Ignore Sol 5 for now and consider it a closed path. We'll check this alternate path in a moment. You recall the primary role of a rotor brake is to hold an already decelerated rotor in place. Let's therefore begin this analysis with the decelerated rotor, and we're going to hold it in place. As we earlier identified, when the spring-extended hydraulically retracted single-acting cylinder on the rotor brake is dumped to tank by the open Sol 4 valve, this cylinder extends and applies the brakes. For obvious reasons, I'm going to call this scenario with Sol 3 and Sol 4 in the de-energized state, i.e. Sol 3 closed and Sol 4 open, apply rotor brake. Given this brake is spring applied, we don't need hydraulic pressure to lock the rotor in place. This means the pump, the accumulator, and everything else can be turned off, or for that matter, ripped off and thrown to the ground and buried under a pile of dirt. That's the point. It's a passively applied safety brake. Its natural state is applied, and you need to actively deliver hydraulic pressure to remove it. Let's say the turbine anemometer has detected wind of a desired speed, has yawed itself into position, and now needs to enter production mode. Prior to pitching the blades, it needs to release the rotor brake. From the applied rotor brake state, Sol 4 is energized and shifts to the closed position. This is a transitional preparatory state I'll call depressurized standby. From depressurized standby, Sol 3 is energized and shifts to the open position. Pressurized flow enters the rod end of the spring-extended hydraulic retracted cylinder, and the cylinder retracts and releases the brakes. For obvious reasons, I'm going to call this rotor release. The system can now pitch the blades, and the turbine is free to conduct the business of converting mechanical power of the wind into usable electrical power. Although effective, rotor release isn't a scenario you want to maintain indefinitely, since once the rotor is spinning and the turbine is producing power, it might do so for quite some time. Once the rotor brake cylinder reaches the limits of travel, and the accumulator fills, and the pump keeps on running, system pressure rises to the setting of the main pressure relief valve, at which point the main pressure relief valve opens and provides a path back to tank. For this reason, the control system might de-energize Sol 3. Sol 3 returns to the closed position. Given both Sol 3 and Sol 4 are closed, there is no path back to tank, and the rod end of the rotor brake cylinder remains pressurized and the brake remains removed. In this scenario, the control system can take the extra step and tell the pump to give it a rest, buddy, and turn off the pump. I'm going to call this scenario with Sol 3 de-energized and Sol 4 energized, i.e. both Sol 3 and Sol 4 closed and the pump off, pressurized standby. Note check valve 1, check valve 2, and the closed dump valve allows the accumulator to maintain system pressure without the pump. As with the yaw system, if pressure sensed by PSR ever dropped below a certain value, the system could briefly open Sol 3 and use either the stored hydraulic energy in the accumulator or briefly energize the pump to refresh the pressure in the rod end of the rotor brake cylinder and then toggle back to the pressurized standby mode and keep the rotor brake released and the rotor spinning. Now that we've got an idea how the system removes the rotor brake, enters pressurized standby as illustrated here, and maintains the rotor brake released, let's discuss how to reapply the rotor brake as it was originally intended. In other words, the rotor brake simply needs to lock a previously decelerated rotor in place. Pay attention to the qualifier, previously decelerated. The task of initially decelerating the moving rotor is primarily the responsibility of the pitch system. When the turbine decides it's time to stop making power, it pitches the blades to 90 degrees, they lose their lift, and the rotor rapidly decelerates and grinds to a halt. Once the turbine senses the rotor has come to a perfect rest, the rotor brakes can hold it in place. The easiest way of doing this from pressurized standby would be to simply de-energize Sol 4 such that it returns to the open position. The rod end is dumped to tank, the spring extends, and the rotor brake is applied and the rotor held in place. We're back to the apply rotor brake position. For reasons that will soon become apparent, I'm going to call this transition from a pressurized standby to a hold a hard stop, meaning full spring pressure is applied all at once. For any of you that have had the pleasure of teaching a teenager how to drive, you realize hard stops aren't something you want to do all the time and all occasions. There may be events where gently applying the brakes before slamming down on them might be a preferred course of action. For this reason, consider the path offered by Sol 5, in series with the pressure relief valve, PRVR. For illustration purposes, let's pretend PRVR is set to open at a pressure such that it reduces force exerted by the spring in the rotor brake cylinder cap end to, let's say, 50%. Let's move back to the pressurized standby state with the rotor brake fully released and the rotor still spinning. Recall in pressurized standby mode, full system pressure in the rod end is working against the spring in the cap end, and the brake pad exerts no pressure on the rotor braking surface, and the rotor spins freely. When the turbine decides it's time to call it quits and stops production, as previously, it pitches the blades such that they lose lift and the rotor decelerates. Only this time, rather than immediately dumping the rotor brake rod end to tank all at once through Sol 4, the system senses rotor speed has dropped below a certain level and instead opens Sol 5, such that PRVR vents pressure in the rod end sufficiently to allow the springs in the cap end to exert half pressure on the braking surface, thus serving to gently decelerate the rotor. For hopefully obvious reasons, I'm going to call this a soft stop. Once the rotor decelerates in a soft stop and comes to a halt, the system can open Sol 4 and reclose Sol 5 to enter the hard stop rotor brake applied state. In addition to providing a gentler stop, the soft stop state might also be used in an emergency condition to decelerate the rotor if the pitch system fails to decelerate quickly enough. In a true emergency, you might even see electrical means of braking the rotor, such as DC injection applied, in combination with pitch regulation and the soft rotor brake. As with the yaw system, by coordinating the sequenced opening and closure of Sol 3 and 4 and monitoring the status of pressure switches PSP and PSR, the system manages when to release, when to enter standby, when to refresh, and when to apply the rotor brake. Additionally, depending upon circumstances, the system may gently decelerate a moving rotor with a soft stop using Sol 5. You note a more industrial scale system might use more than one rotor brake cylinder connected in parallel to increase holding power rather than the single braking cylinder as I've illustrated here. Alright, now that we got an idea of how both the yaw and rotor brakes are applied and removed, let's discuss some of the supplemental features you might find in a wind turbine yaw and rotor braking system. As the previous scenarios illustrated, there's brief moments of activity followed by long, idle periods of holding a particular state. For example, when wind blows from a particular direction all day, the wind turbine is going to turn in that direction, apply the yaw brake, go into pressurized standby, release the rotor brake, go into pressurized standby, pitch the blades, and sit there all day making power. In this scenario, the yaw brake is applied, and a majority of the time it's in a pressurized standby state, only occasionally needing to take sips from the accumulator every once in a while to refresh its grip. Similarly, the rotor brake is released, and a majority of the time in a pressurized standby state, only occasionally needing to take sips from the accumulator to keep the rotor spinning freely. During these long idle states, what's the pump and the oil in the reservoir doing? I tell you what they're doing. These bums are sitting on the couch with a bag of Cheetos in their lap watching Rick and Morty, i.e. getting cold and fat and lazy. Now, the last thing you want to rely on in a critical safety system like brakes is a bunch of lazy, unprepared bums. For this reason, consider the path offered by Sol F. During an extended idle period, the system may periodically open Sol F and energize the pump. This is the controller's way of tipping the lazy bums off the couch every once in a while and making them run a couple laps around the house to make sure they're ready for work. In this simplified schematic, I've represented Sol F feeding an offline or kidney loop filter, but it could also be some other fluid conditioning device like a heater in case the oil gets cold from sitting idle all day. By periodically energizing the pump and opening a valve like Sol F, it circulates the oil in the reservoir through whatever conditioning device you're using to make sure it remains ready for action. Let's now discuss the accumulator, dump valve, and hand pump. As you're probably aware, the quantity of stored fluid in the accumulator serves as a backup reserve. Even with the pump shut off, broken, or otherwise disabled, the turbine can still apply the yaw brake by opening Sol 1 and closing Sol 2. On the rotor side, it doesn't even need the accumulator to apply the brake. All it does is open Sol 4, which dumps the rod into tank, thereby allowing the spring to apply the rotor brake. In this capacity, the stored energy in the accumulator allows the system to conduct an orderly shutdown in the event of a pump failure. Let's now talk about the dump valve. As with any backup system, the accumulator can also be a source of potentially hazardous stored energy, and sometimes needs to be blocked or removed prior to performing service on a system. For this reason, a controlled discharge path exists through the manually actuated dump valve. A technician wishing to depressurize this system could turn off the pump and then open the dump valve, thereby allowing the stored energy in the accumulator to drain to the tank through the fixed flow control valve. The flow control valve ensures the accumulator is drained in a slow, controlled fashion and doesn't suffer damages during an uncontrolled discharge. After verifying the system has reached a safe de-energized state, this task can be performed, the dump valve reclosed, and the system returned to service. You note something interesting happened when the accumulator was dumped to tank and the valves were in the present position. Which brake is applied and which brake is released? As we mentioned above, the rotor brake doesn't need hydraulic pressure to be applied. All it needs is a spring. When the accumulator is dumped to tank with the valves in the present position, the yaw brake, however, loses pressure and is released. Is that what you intended to do when you dumped the accumulator? Maybe, maybe not. We'll examine the means of reapplying the yaw brake manually in a moment. If in the event of a particular service task necessitating an accumulator discharge also necessitates the pump remains de-energized, or if perhaps the pump truly is permanently disabled, the hand pump and manual overrides in the valves provide an alternate means to pressurize and interact with the system. When taking full manual control of a turbine, a technician essentially acts as both the pump and the controller and must at all times be aware of the potentially dangerous consequences of their actions. When taking manual control of a turbine, I'm perhaps most concerned with the rotor brake. Recall the principal means of decelerating a rotor is aerodynamic regulation of the blade angle via the pitch system. If the blades are in some aggressive pitch angle position and the rotor brake released, the rotor may rapidly accelerate out of control. For this reason, prior to manually releasing a rotor brake, always ensure the blade pitch is appropriately set for the given wind conditions. Consider an occasion with the valves in the de-energized positions as illustrated, where a technician has just dumped the accumulator tank, performed some service, and now needs to perform 3 tasks without the use of the pump or the controller. Task 1, apply the yaw brake. Task 2, release the rotor brake. And Task 3, once the rotor passively spins to a desired position, reapply the rotor brake and lock it in place so some more work can be done in the hub. If you're up to the challenge, by all means pause the lecture and see if you can determine the exact sequence used to perform these tasks. Again, Task 1, apply the yaw brake. Task 2, release the rotor brake. And Task 3, apply the rotor brake from an entirely zero energy state and a de-energized pump. Here's a hint. You are the pump. You are the controller. If you're tracking, here's the sequence you'd use. Task 1, we've got to apply the yaw brakes. First, close the dump valve. Next, grab that handle and get to pumping. Believe me, it takes a lot more effort and time than you think. After a while, the yaw brake cylinders extend and pressure in the system begins to rise. Eventually, the accumulator fills. You note that the auxiliary pressure relief valve limits maximum pressure capable of being generated by the hand pump, as would the main pressure relief valve do so for the motor-driven pump. Once the auxiliary pressure relief valve actuates, often identifiable by a high-pitched whine or whistle, a technician can take a pressure reading at PSY to ensure the yaw brake has a good grip. At this point, a technician could manually override Sol 1 to the closed position. We've effectively entered the pressurized standby condition, and the nacelle is locked in place with the yaw brake applied. Task 2, remove the rotor brake. What we're doing here is simulating a scenario where you're trying to get the rotor into a specific position so you can enter the hub. Let's say it's not initially in this position, you got to release the rotor brake and let it idly spin prior to locking it in place. This is a coordinated action between 2 techs, often with one working the valves in the manifold and the other sticking their head out the nacelle hatch telling them when they're in position. Note there is some yelling and name calling associated with this task if it does not go smoothly. Prior to releasing the rotor brake, ensure the blades are set in appropriate pitch angle. Releasing the brake is a 2-step procedure, and it needs to be performed with proper sequence if you don't want to waste all that hand pumping you did earlier. Recall the rotor brake needs to be pressurized to be removed. We've already got pressure in the accumulator from your previous work with the hand pump. First, a technician would manually actuate Sol 4 to the closed position to block the path back to tank. This is a depressurized standby. It's only a transitional state. Then a technician would manually actuate Sol 3 to the open position. fluid stored in the accumulator fills the rod end and lifts the rotor brake pad from the braking surface and releases the rotor brake. If you perform the sequence out of order, starting with 3 instead of 4, you'd run the risk of dumping the accumulator and all that effort you put in earlier. Task 3, apply the rotor brake. Beginning with the rotor brake removed, we simply need to let the spring do its job. When the tech with his head out the hatch says stop, the technician working the valves in the manifold needs to perform 2 actions in a precise sequence. First, return sole 3 to the closed position. This is a pressurized standby state where the rotor brake is still released. Then return sole 4 to the open state. The rod end is dumped to tank and the spring applies the rotor brake, hopefully with the rotor in the desired position. As previous, if you perform the sequence out of order, starting with 4 instead of 3, you run the risk of depleting the accumulator. Speaking of running the accumulator down, realize the accumulator stores a limited quantity of fluid and cannot be expected to apply and release the brakes more than a handful of times before pressure drops too low that it's eventually incapable of lifting the brake pads from the braking surface and releasing the rotor brake. Once pressure drops too low, a technician may have to repressurize the system and accumulator again with a couple thousand strokes in the hand pump prior to releasing the rotor brake. Lastly, I should note that after one has taken manual control of a hydraulic system and prior to returning it to service, you must safely release any manual overrides you may have placed in the system. A manual override essentially forces a valve into a particular position and keeps it there, essentially ignoring any solenoid, pilot signal, or spring's influence. For the system to run as intended, it needs to have full control of all the valves that comprise it. Alright, I do believe we've accomplished the task of familiarizing ourselves with a wind turbine yaw and rotor brake system, at least on an introductory level. We discussed the purpose of the yaw and rotor brakes, reviewed those components commonly found in those systems, notably motor prime movers, pumps, reservoirs, filters, pressure relief valves, directional control valves, switches, sensors, and actuators like spring-applied hydraulically released single-acting cylinders and their evil twins, hydraulically applied spring-released single-acting cylinders, and 2 types of brake mounting methods, floating and fixed calipers. We additionally looked at the function of yaw and rotor braking systems during normal operation procedures, as well as during emergency backup operation with an accumulator, hand pump, and manual overrides. As I cautioned you earlier in this lecture, not all systems work identically to the simplified representation, and you can and will see variations of this in the field. Always consult the operations manual for the specific turbine of interest. Remember to review these concepts as often as you need to really drive it home. Imagine how well lab will go if you know what you're doing. Thank you very much for your attention and interest, and we'll see you again during the next lecture of our series. Remember to tell your lazy lab partner about this resource. Be sure to check out the Big Bad Tech channel for additional resources and updates.